Hi, my name's Kim Arnold. Welcome to my YouTube channel and my process video for this layout today. I'm just using an old 49er market paper that I have that I absolutely love, and I love the purple colours in it, which works so well with the photos. I've then used some 49er market flowers, some files that I've cut using my Cameo, and a beautiful coppery glitter colour paper. I then have some old bits and pieces that I had left over from other layouts, and I'm using that as well. To start off with, I'm doing some distress oxide ink in a grey colour through a stencil. I then attempted to distress that a bit with some water. Semi-successful today over this. I think it would have been better if I had some gesso under it, because the paper was super absorbent with the water that I put on. I was going to use a gold ink, but I decided since my paper was very coppery that I would go with a copper coloured powder that I have, which I mixed up with some water. And then I used that in the same way that I would use an ink. So I added some water. That wasn't actually enough water, so I added some more water and then created some beautiful splatters on the background of this with these glitter powders, which are from Pearl X powdered pigments. You do have to be careful after you put them on because they smudge quite easily. So it could be something that you do at the end if you are using them. Otherwise you could use a mist or anything else to do the splatters. So I've done a lot over the left hand side where I had put the ink through the stencil, and then I also put splatters on the right side, because what I am going to do is now cut this paper into sections. First of all, I'm going to trim it down because I am going to mount it on top of this copper glitter paper. So I'm just cutting it down by 1/4 inch on two sides. Then I'm going to cut it, I think it's at around about 4 3/4. So a 4 3/4 piece on the left with the remainder on the right. And then I'm going to heavily distress around the papers before I lay them over the copper cardstock. So I'm just distressing at the moment. I'm using a Heidi Swap edge distresser, which I love, and I have had several of these for years. You'll see that I ripped it quite badly on one side there, but guess what? It works perfectly when you put it on the layout in the end. So I just got into it with the distresser and really roughed up those edges. So what I'm going to do is mount these over this copper coloured paper. Now you'll note that there's pieces missing in that. That's because I actually used that same paper to cut out my title and some leaves, and I cut them in spots on that glitter paper where I knew it wouldn't show through the design that I wanted to do, and that meant that I could get two purposes out of the one sheet of paper, because you're not going to see underneath the top sheet. So that's why it looks like it's got a whole heap of chunks missing out of it. I did start using an art glitter glue, which is my preferred glue, but glitter cardstock can be really hard to stick onto, and after holding it there for a bit, I decided it wasn't strong enough, and so I went for the more heavy duty glue, which is the Stampera Extra Fort glue, which I really like. And works super duper well with sticking onto glitter cardstock or things like flowers, which you will see when I do the flower cluster, that I also use this glue because it is very strong holding and works really well. So I'm putting plenty of that on and sticking a layer of chipboard down, and then I'm sticking the paper pieces that I just distressed on top of that. So the chipboard will just give dimension between the pattern paper and the glitter cardstock. So I'm just trying to place them so that you see a bit of the copper glitter around the outside edge, as well as a little bit down the middle where the split is. The paper I'm using behind the photos is just some offcuts from some other layouts that I had. The ledger paper has a coppery coloured foil print on it, and then just a couple of other small pieces that I had in greys. I am backing the photos with tissue paper, so just a small edge of tissue paper around to soften them a bit. So I do both of those photos. I'm back to using my art glitter glue, which is my general purpose glue that I use for sticking most stuff down onto a layout. So I am going to back these photos in a minute with cards with chipboard so that they pop up more off the page. And you can see there, I'm back, as I said, using the art glitter glue, which works fine at this stage. You do have to be careful with that Pearl X powders. As I said, they can come off, and you've got to make sure that you don't put your photos and stuff on top of it, because they'll come off onto your photos, but it does dust off. I'm just pulling off from the sticky sheet that I use in the Cameo the title, which is Celebrate Today, that I cut from that copper glitter cardstock. Now I'm going to put a bit more chipboard behind that ledger paper, the copper ledger paper, and I'm just sticking all of those pieces down now. So just putting a bit of chipboard behind that foiled ledger paper lifts it up a bit. Ultimately, when I finish the flower cluster, you don't see very much of that paper, but at this stage I didn't know that was going to happen. So I've stuck the photos down. I did put another little wedge of chipboard in because for the photo, because once I put the chipboard under that ledger paper, the photos would have been at an angle if I'd just stuck them with the one layer of chipboard. So they needed just a bit under that right hand side of each photo to lift them up so that they were flat. I was just making sure everything was in the right place. These are the little foliage pieces that I also cut from the copper cardstock, and they're super cute, and I'm going to use them in the flower clusters. So now I'm going to start building up my flower cluster. I've got a few wired pieces here that's little pieces of sort of foliage stuff, and I know a little bauble twisty wire thing that 49er Market has in their flowers, which I really like. It just gives added texture. So I'm going to start building now some leaves that'll appear at the top. So a few of the bigger leaves. Now I'm going to stick down that wired piece. The glue I am using, and I use for most flower clusters, is this extra strong glue, Tempera extra strong glue, which if you happen to be watching this from Timaru or from New Zealand, my local scrapbooking store Embellish It sells that glue, but it's widely available. So now I'm just building up this flower cluster, and so sometimes I will put them down to have a look, and sometimes I will just start sticking and slowly build those up. So there's a couple of different packs that I am using of the 49er Market flowers, but they're in these pinks and purple colours. I've also got some fussy cut leaves that was from an old piece of paper that had some really nice foliage on it, so I've cut some of those leaves out, which I'm tucking around. I'm also tucking in some more of those stems with the pink baubles on the end. So I'm just basically playing with various bits and pieces to create a balanced flower cluster. So I just keep adding flowers in until I think it looks right. Now my method of doing this is to use a heap of glue, and then the flowers will stick into that, and as the glue sets they'll hold. That particular extra strong glue does grab reasonably quickly, so sometimes I'll just hold it for a few seconds until it does grab. Now I'm cutting up that foliage and just feeding it in around the cluster. So most pieces are on the edges, but one of the bits is also going to end up in the middle. And then to finish that cluster off, I will actually stick that little vellum butterfly, which is really pretty, and it just sits on top of the cluster. Okay, so I'm going to put the title on now so that it doesn't sit completely flat and has a bit of dimension. I'm using some foam tape, which I'm doubling up, and I'll put it below. I'll put it on the more solid piece of the title, and that will enable the title to lift. You will see that I did end up gluing a couple of little bits of the title to make sure it sits perfectly in place, and that works well, even though the whole lot is not popped up on foam tape. Most of the Celebrate will sit up, but as I said, to hold it in place, we'll stick down the end of the C and the end of the E. I'm now just going to build another little cluster over at the end of the title. I've got a little acetate flower, which is from Pink Fresh, and I've got some more of the same 49er Market flowers that I used on the left side, and another really pretty pink butterfly. I'm going to also cut up a bit more of that copper foliage and work that in. So I'll just now stick all that down. Faff a bit, just dressing up the corners a bit more, and stick a final word phrase, good things are going to happen, onto the corner, bottom left corner, using Tim Holtz sticker book. And then I think the layout is done, but ultimately after I finish recording, I add a little bit more of the ink through the stencil, including over under the butterfly, which you will see in these final photos. Thank you so much for joining me today to look at my process video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you back here again shortly. Thank you.